Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Bruce. My friends call me Fluff, and I am here with a very special guest, Mr. Mark Lewis, who is an actual real-life friend of mine. Mark, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here.
So I thought we would hang out a little bit, and the majority of our conversations we have are guitar tone, guitar amp, guitar nerd stuff, and I do not know your answers for these questions, but I thought we would go over your 5 favorite metal guitar tones of all time.
We're gonna try and do it. I mean, the longest video you ever had on this channel is 30 minutes. So if you're now that you're gonna actually have a 4.5 hour video, I'm happy you're stepping into the long format.
No. It's the Zoom's gonna kick us off in like 40 minutes. So
Okay.
I think my battery will last 40 minutes as well. So we're going to talk about 5 favorite guitar tones, and shout out to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. If you would like to build your own rig to get your own guitar tone, head on down to the link in the description, sweetwater.com. Thanks, Sweetwater. And with that, we don't have to go in a particular, like, number 1 is your favorite of all time. These are just 5 of your favorites, not unless you say otherwise. These are just 5 of your favorite tones.
Yes, and shout out to Sweetwater, by the way, for many times saving my ass when I needed stuff.
They tend to do that, right?
Yes.
So, okay, guitar tone number 5. What do you got?
This is so tough, dude. I was thinking about a couple of different things, whether I should do this of like the things that were the most influential to me, or I thought was the best, or the most life-changing, or whatever. So
yeah.
of course I don't even know where to begin, but I can tell you that as a kid, and this will get people, I think, hooked in, because people are gonna throw shit at the wall and be pissed off. Slayer, Diabolus, and Musica, which is often revered as their worst album, hugely influential to me and wildly underrated as far as the production. Insane guitar sound, insane drum sound, and an interesting tidbit. Gosh, I can't believe I'm slipping on his name right now. His first name is his name's Greg Gordon. That's who did this record. And I was so obsessed with this record in the 90s because I'm a Slayer fanatic.
Sure.
And I love all things Slayer. I don't think they have a bad album. But I think that Diabolus is far from the least enjoyable. But this guy, Greg Gordon, did it under Rick Rubin. He was engineering for Rick Rubin, and his name's nowhere on the credits. And I figured this out by contacting a friend of mine who is the VP of A&R at Atlantic. And I can't remember how it led to me contacting Steve-O, but I said, hey, do you know who did this record? And he said, I think it was a guy named Greg Gordon. And I said, do you know Greg? He said, yeah, he's a good friend of mine. Here's his email.
Wow.
Yeah, and I ended up talking to him. Anyway, long story long, not to get too into the weeds, but a lot of the reasons he believes the way that the record sounds the way it does is because it was done, I think it was done at A&M, or maybe at the time Cherokee or whatever it was called, studios, and the Neve in there was recapped with some cheap parts. And he thinks that it has
interesting.
It has to do with the lack of headroom on that console, and is one of the reasons it sounds so wildly out of control. I fucking love the way that record sounds. And
I remember it sounding really great too.
And it just sounds like the whole thing is exploding. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's very unique in the Slayer catalog, and the guitar tone is hands down the nastiest they've ever had.
And they were still using, they were just 800s. That's what they used for every album.
800s,
right? Even though you have a huge variance of guitar tones from album to album, which goes to show, like, really matters how you were capturing these guitar tones, because I believe that's literally the same amp, his Beast 800, that he's using on everything, right?
Yes, and I don't know. I think at that point Carey was playing everything, because there came a time when Carey started to play it all.
Right.
And even the Jeff penned songs, which Jeff wrote a lot of that album, including the opening track. I mean, it's enough for you to just hear the opening track. It's one of my top 5 Slayer songs of all time. Bitter Peace. That's a Hanneman track. And plus they were in C sharp for a lot of that album too.
Yeah.
And it just sounds so insane and nasty, and it's something I feel is really missing these days with modern productions. Like I wish I could get that nasty, but a lot of bands won't go for it, or they're too scared, or it's just not the type of material to suit it.
Sure, and that's definitely a vibe is everything, right?
Yes.
So of course, if the material is not suited for that kind of thing, of course it wouldn't really work.
Absolutely.
So okay, guitar tones. Favorite guitar tone number 4. What do you think?
This is really tough, dude. I have such a list, and I'm trying to kind of condense it down. But I will say that one of the things that really got me, and I did not plan this. Oops, I'm bumping my mic here.
No, it's fine.
I did not plan this, but Crowbar, Oddfellows Rest, is one of my favorites as well. Insane, insanely perfect for the writing and for the riffs, criminally underrated as well. It's something I still strive for in saturation and things like that. And Kirk still really sounds like that to this day. He's brilliant riff guy. And just incredible album. And another one where the opening track is just, it's all you need to hear if you want to know what Crowbar is about. That fucking Planets Collide, that song, dude. And the way it all comes together with the guitar sound, it's just one of those perfect melding things. Incredible.
And I believe he was still on his classic Randall RG100 boosted with the Metal Zone setup at that time.
I think so. I mean, and that's the other thing is like, we'll talk about Dimebag at this point, but I've had a hard time finding out what cabinets they're using, and which is such a huge part of it, man. A lot of people say that Dimebag was using the Randall, the
Jaguar speakers.
Yes. But then I hear guys saying there was Vintage 30s involved. I've heard suggestions of possibly Marshall. I don't know, dude.
I mean, Terry Date's up here near me. I could go. I would
love to know, and I'm sure that we know people that know, that know Grady and that know Terry. I don't have a lot of info, but yeah, I mean, we'll go from there into, let's go into number 3, which I would probably put as Far Beyond Driven.
And
it's just,
it's
you get into these things, and I thought about this a lot with these records where I could name so many records, and is there better guitar tones? Yes. Is there whatever, but is there more influential? Maybe not. Because I'm not sure I would, have picked Dime's tone for myself, but for him and for the way those songs come together and the way Terry put it together, it's insane. And it was the crowning achievement to me sonically in the Pantera catalog. Like, Cowboys sounds nuts, and Vulgar sounds nuts.
It does.
They do, but Far Beyond Driven had that vibe, and it's so insanely influential. I mean, I remember hearing that in the Bleeding at the same time, and like Cannibal Corpse was like way over my head at the time. But hearing that Far Beyond Driven was just like, it was so insanely aggressive, and it was like reminded me of And Justice for All, in terms of like the
interesting
extremeness of it.
Yeah.
Because I was young. I mean, I was, pre-teen, I think. I'll be 40 in a couple months. So I was 11 or something when that record came out.
Yeah, okay. I'll be 42 in November, and I was actually, so we didn't have cable. We were too broke to have cable or whatever. So Christmas, in what year did that album come out? 94, I think it was?
94, yeah.
So it was Christmas time, and we would go over to my aunt's house, and she had this rec room, and no one else was in the rec room. And I would turn on MTV, and I saw it was the I'm Broken video, and I couldn't believe something this heavy was on MTV. They didn't play that heavy stuff at then. I was like, this is the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. That riff.
Yeah.
What?
No, I totally agree. It was perfect to me at the time. And like I said, Cannibal Corpse I came back to because one of my best friend's brothers had them both on cassette. And it was just like, I remember reading the Cannibal Corpse lyrics. I'm like, this is way too much for me. You know?
I went and secretly bought Far Beyond Driven. I walked down to Blockbuster Music, and I actually bought it after hearing that, but I had to hide it from my friends because this is like Seattle area, the whole grunge thing, 1994.
Right.
Guitar solos were the most uncool thing ever, and I actually hid Far Beyond Driven under my pillow, so when my friends would come over, they wouldn't see that I was listening to a heavy band like Pantera. True story.
Oh man, you traitor.
I was a kid. I was, like, because they would you didn't want to get shit for whatever you were listening to. I did the same thing with Oasis. So
yeah. It's what a time. What a time the 90s was. I mean, we'll never be able to touch on all of it as I sip my coffee out of my PRS mug.
Hey, I have a Fender mug. What? Wait, here we go.
Yeah.
I have a nice Fender mug.
Oh, and talking to
your mug's
my
better and
Austrian
larger.
audio mic. Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
But dude, it was Far Beyond Driven. I mean, it's the perfect culmination for me. And then I don't know if I can do a top 5. Maybe we might have to do a top 6. But
okay, we can do top 6.
We got to put in. We got to obviously put in Van Halen. And I couldn't decide between Van Halen 1 or 1984 because the first 4 records, they are pretty similar, but in terms of the sound, and a lot of times I in my head I had to go back and think about this. A lot of times I would have said, "Oh, Fair Warning," because of Unchained. But when I listened back thinking about this when you asked me to do this, and I was like, you know what? I got to say Van Halen 1 and 1984 were the best representations to me of what Eddie was doing at the time, because Van Halen 1 is so crisp. It's
very crisp.
God damn. And everybody's so afraid of that nowadays, but it was so influential. I know for a fact to Dimebag and Metallica and those guys like that, like, and just, like what Ted Templeman was doing with Eddie's guitar sound, and he kept it simple. It was just a 57 on a Marshall cabinet. And I have some of those that era Celestion. Like I have a 74 Marshall with those.
What was the other speaker that they mic'd up? There was a JBL in there, right? Because I just watched the Sunset Sound. I just watched it. It was the Sunset Sound YouTube channel.
Yeah.
They actually, there's that, it's the sound because he had, you see those metal cap cones. Those are not Celestions. Those are JBLs. And they put a 57 on the JBL according to the sheet. Yeah. They put a 57 on the JBL and the 57 on what would have been, I think, a greenback or something like that in the Marshall cab.
I think it was either the T1221 or the T1211.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah, but that's the sound. That's the missing link that most people miss.
Well, I will tell you, like, I have a 74 Marshall cabinet that gets used on a lot of records. Like, it was used it was used on Kin by Whitechapel, but we had a different speaker in it. But I have the 4 original speakers. And I got to there's 2 of them that I really love. I got to put them back in that cabinet. But motherfucker, dude, like, you mic up that speaker and it sounds like Van Halen 1. It sounds it's so there, and it's just like with Ride the Lightning too, Metallica Ride the Lightning. Which is like, I know for sure that they had to have used a greenback on that album. There's no way, and the same thing with Kill 'Em All. There's no way it was anything else. And it's just that chainsaw high end that everybody's afraid of nowadays, and those speakers are surprisingly tight and have a fantastic low end. Yeah, they really do. But that's a little bit of nerd stuff. But then, I mean, if we go with 2.5 or 1.5, we gotta talk about Black Sabbath.
Oh, dude, which album?
Well, I would say the first record or Mob Rules, which people would never think about, but.
Really?
Well, I mean, Mob Rule, Dio era Sabbath is my favorite Sabbath, with the exception of the first Sabbath and Sabotage, and some of Masters of Reality.
I was gonna say Masters of Reality for me.
Yeah. Because Children of the Grave, so it's kind of hard. Like I can't. It's hard to say, but I will say this.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick a favorite Iommi tone, but I will tell you that even though Sabotage is my favorite Ozzy era, it's the sound of it is great, but it's not my favorite guitar tone. But you got like there's kind of that era between after Masters of Reality and before Heaven and Hell where I think the drug use and everything was just so high that maybe there wasn't really, they didn't really nail it down on the guitar tones as much, but the riffs were there. But Tony's vision, I mean, dude, he's it. I mean, I will go down saying that Tony Iommi is the most influential musician in, as far as guitar, in the history of rock and roll, period. I truly believe that. I do not, I believe it over Jimmy Page. I believe it over even Jimi Hendrix. And Hendrix is one of my favorite of all time. But the way the guitar is played on the radio and nowadays, I think Tony Iommi has more to do with it than anybody.
Yeah. And that's hard to argue.
Yeah, and Hendrix, I mean, dude, we could do a 3-hour podcast on Hendrix. He's, you know, I feel so strongly about what he's done and believe so much in that, what he achieved. But then, yeah, dude, I mean, Iommi's just brilliant. And that first record is insane. And then obviously Masters of Reality with Children of the Grave. And then go to a song like Voodoo on Mob Rules, where it's just Tony's guitar by itself. It's like, oh my God. And it was 1981. And it was, you know, the same time that Randy Rhoads was doing his thing. And I personally think that Randy's a little overrated because he died. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's not a great player.
Oh boy!
I'm not saying
Leave a comment down below. Leave a comment down below, guys.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not a great player, and I'll argue this all day long. I mean, I know so many guys that feel differently, but Tony to me he's obviously was probably 15 or 20 years older than Randy or something, or 10 at least. He was so much more refined, and you hear Mob Rules, and it's like, man, it's like in Martin Birch, and like that way that whole production came together. I mean, Martin Birch is so underrated and so passed by, especially.
Was Tony on Boogies by then? Do you know?
I don't know. There was a weird.
I don't know either.
There was a weird time he played Sun Amps in the 80s.
Right.
And I really don't know if that was a Boogie. I would be surprised, but also not. But yeah, I mean, he's just so fucking. He's just the godfather of it all, man. And
yeah, he really is.
Yeah, and then of course number one would be the Black Album. I mean, it's just sonically, forget the songs, you know, and it being the number one selling album of our generation, whether it's heavy metal or not.
Easy.
Just what Bob Rock and Randy Staub and Hetfield, you know, achieved on that is it's just madness. Like it's the perfect storm of you know, an insanely complicated setup actually working out, and incredible songs and incredible playing. And it inspired me a lot. Like I started digging a lot more into that in the past couple of years, and like I started using room mics on cabinets, which is something I never did for a long time. And you know,
I've never done that.
Taking a piece out of Bob's book and being like, well, what was Bob finding or whatever, you know? And I would do that. I do it a little bit different than Bob. Like I'll build a tunnel for the cabinet at times and put like an 87 or the Lawton 387 at the end, or even a U67 at times. And then I'll time align it. I don't think Bob ever time aligned it. I'm not sure. But I wish I could pull stuff up and show you what it does, but it does some really cool things to the mids, and you know, like just I've done such a deep dive on the Black Album, dude. Like it's so wildly influential, and it's like, you know, it's hard nowadays to like I know what I love, but I know that I am a generation away from a lot of the people who are buying, or 2 generations away from the people that are buying my records that I'm making with artists. Yeah. And a lot of them have never heard the whole Black Album, or some of them don't even know who Pantera is. And it's just crazy to me, which is why, you know, I don't know how long we've been going at this point, but people are going to be like, I can't believe he didn't mention End of Heartache or
you know, Lamb of God or something.
Yeah.
Or...
See, Lamb of God, I mean, Lamb of God's more like a Slayer. Like I wouldn't consider, you know, Rain and Blood or Seasons in the Abyss one of the greatest guitar tones of all time, but I consider the songs iconic. And I feel that way about 100%. Lamb of God. I mean, they inspired a generation, but I don't I don't consider them monsters of sonics in
Yeah.
terms of guitar sounds. But I love that I know it's them, and that's what really matters. You know,
That's exactly what matters.
yeah. Because I mean, we could go and say, The Way of All Flesh or Mars of Sirius is insane, or but in like, or the end of Heartache, or Carcass Heartwork blew my fucking
dude.
face off. Absolutely insane. But like, say when I listen back to End of Heartache now, like in my studio, I'm like, man, this is really dark, and it's got a lot of strange peaks and weird things going on, and I really admire Sneap's mix on that because it's incredibly simple. The vocals are bone fucking dry, shit like that, and the guitars are huge, but it's more about the riffs. It's like people get caught up in the riffs, and the same thing with like In Flames Clayman or something like. People get caught up in the riffs, and the sonics are wonderful. They're great on those albums, but I don't consider them engineering and visionary marvels like the albums that I mentioned, I guess.
I mean, you listen to the Black Album. I listened to it now just the other day, and I think, how in the hell did they get this to sound like this then? Like, what? How?
Well, they had $1 million.
Well, yeah. I mean, that helps. And a year.
Yeah.
They had a year and $1 million.
Yeah.
So.
And dude, people ask me that shit all the time. It's like, well, dude, how, I have imposter syndrome, like a lot of people. Like I hate a lot of shit that I do, and it's very few times am I happy. But I think that's part of the gig, But people are like, how did you get this guitar sound so good, or this and whatever? It's like, man, I don't know that I'm a better engineer than a lot of guys. I just take more time. I just take my time, and I don't bill bands by the hour. I don't bill things by the hour. It's like we sit here until it's right, and bands appreciate that, and I can sleep easier even though I might wake up in a year and hate the way that record sounds, or dread turning into masters or whatever it is. But yeah, man, it's like the Black Album is absolutely, it's madness what they achieve sonically.
Agree.
And it's a madness what they achieved as far as the songs, dude. But like I said, there's so many records I could name, and people are going to be mad that I didn't. Like Entombed Wolverine Blues, or Cannibal Corpse Bloodthirst, or Nevermore Dead Heart in a Dead World. Like,
there you go.
Just things that really, really got me. Like, I so much respect to Jeff Loomis for his, ear, and Andy's ear then, and I really loved Andy's work at that time. It's not that I don't love his work now, but I work 24/7. It's rare that I get to hear one of his records and really dig in. It's what I mean. So
yeah, I got to ask just a good buddy of mine, and I actually he has that guitar. So at that time, I got to ask him all about Dead Heart in a Dead World because I've been obsessed with that guitar tone as well. And the way he explains it, like he had this 7-string prototype guitar that was handmade for him, and it had this just crazy sound to it that is in pieces in a closet to this day in his house. But if you ask him, like, oh man, I bet you guys spent all this time. Nope. They had the the rectifier, they had a Maxon, they had a Marshall cab, threw up a few mics and went, you good with that? And he went, yeah, sure, sounds good. And then they recorded the record. It was nothing.
Well, dude, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's getting out of control, and it's getting really frustrating with the people coveting the block letters and the certain era of speakers. Like, dude, I would love that to be true. That a certain era of vintage 30 and like respect to Nolly and to guys like that have done is the type of research that I have as well. But I mean, I have 100 vintage 30s in the fucking drum room, dude. Like, there's stacks 12 feet high. I mean, or 11 feet high. The ceilings are 11 feet tall in that room, and there's ceiling speakers stacked to the fucking ceiling. So it's really getting out of hand with people looking for these early 2000s Mesas and the block letter amps, and it's like it's all about what works at the time, and it's great to know and understand certain eras, but to me it's all a lottery with the speakers and the amps and everything like that. I mean, you can get things close. You can get things close, yeah, but you really it's a lottery, and it's funny because I see this renaissance of people, you know, like Middleton just released Tone Hub with STL, and he's all about these early 2000s Mesa cabinets and the block letterhead, and it's awesome. It's a great sounding plugin, but you know, Andy and Colin and guys like that were making records in the late 90s and the early 2000s, they weren't like, this 2001 Mesa speaker is the best one.
Right.
It was just what they had.
And it sounded good. Okay,
yeah,
let's go.
Yeah, and you know, and I saw the Vintage 30 video that Nolly made with Christian Cola, and it was cool. Like,
it was interesting as hell, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was flattered that he mentioned Audio Hammer, and it's like, you know, the things that we were doing at the time. But dude, it's the funny thing about that is, you know, those records that I made there were with a 2007 slant oversized Mesa and a 2006 or 8. I can't remember what year. It probably had to have been a 6.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a 2005. Either way, it was 2005 to 8 is when these speakers existed. And that's, you know, to shout out all the YouTube guys, that's Glenn Fricker's demon year. He thinks those are the worst speakers ever made. And I'm like, dude, it's like I made a career out with those speakers, you know, because it was the only 412 we had. And when we, you know, or not the only, it was the only Mesa, 2 Mesas that we had. And we had a Marshall, which I still have, you know, and all of those speakers are centered around 2005, 2006, 7, 8, you know, shit like that. And it was just what we had, man. You know, and people. I
love that.
Yeah, it wasn't like we got to have the 2001 speakers or the specific Marshall. You know, like the 800 I have over there happens to be an 84 because it was used at Guitar Center. It's not because I wanted a fucking 84. You know, and it just.
I love that.
Yeah, you know. But
all right.
So anyway,
okay. Well,
I've probably blabbed more than enough here.
No, it's good advice from someone who is obviously in the thick of it and has been in the thick of it for a long time. You've made some of my personal favorite guitar tones, some of the unearthed guitar tones in particular, and the Whitechapel guitar tones for me are some of the benchmarks of what I kind of go for and will never achieve. But thank you so much for your contribution for guitar tone nerdery. Dude, we all are better for it.
Dude, you're way too kind. I'm just glad that people enjoy what I do, man, and I'm lucky to get to do it. So, you know, that's super cool, man.
All right. Well, I will link down below in the description if you would like to check out what Mark Lewis is doing at any given time. I'll link to his socials and all that stuff and all of his incendiary gear opinions. And with that, you've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Mark, thanks once again. And we'll see you next time, boys and girls.
You're the man, buddy. Thanks.